The year was 1968. On a cold March night, there was a strange situation in the Cu Chi forest north of Saigon. The American 24th Infantry Division had been missing for only 3 weeks. The interesting thing was that no trace of the missing soldiers could be found. Sergeant Michael Rodriguez was a 37-year-old soldier with 2 years of experience in Vietnam. However, the events of the past few days had caused him to reevaluate his entire military career. What had happened to his missing comrades made no sense, and this was causing his unease to grow. The first soldier to go missing was Lieutenant James Patterson. He was the most experienced tunnel expert. Since arriving in Vietnam, he had worked in hundreds of tunnels and had the ability to solve even the most complex traps set by the Viet Cong. That night, the messages Patterson had heard over the radio were still echoing in his mind. God, what was that sound? That wasn't a human being, it couldn't be. The panic in his voice had terrified Rodriguez and made him jump. After the messages came over the radio, a loud scream was heard, and the signals were cut off immediately. Rodriguez still got goosebumps when he remembered that night. Patterson was missing, and he started looking for him. He went down into the tunnel, and what he saw terrified him. There were only bloodstains and a foul smell reminiscent of rotten food. But Patterson's body was nowhere to be found. The most disturbing thing he saw was that the smell resembled the odor of rotting flesh. Strangely, it was almost captivating, because that smell had been lingering near the campsite where they had been staying for the past 3 nights. Sergeant Tony Martinez called out, "Sergeant, the commander wants to see you." Rodriguez noticed the concern in Martinez's voice. The young soldier's face bore the same expression he had worn since they lost Davis the previous week. Fear. Staff Sergeant Robert Davis was the second casualty after Patterson. He had disappeared in the same tunnel under the same circumstances. Another strange, eerie voice was heard over the radio. It said, Something is calling me. I have to go." There was no fear in Davis's voice, only a strange excitement, as if he were spellbound. Rodriguez suddenly felt the atmosphere of the camp change. The wind had stopped blowing, and the strange sounds coming from the forest had fallen silent. There was only a faint, whistling-like hum in the distance, and the smell was growing stronger again. Rodriguez whispered, "Martinez, can you feel it too?" Martinez's eyes showed the same fear, and he nodded yes. "Sergeant, this smell, it's the same smell we smelled the night Patterson disappeared." Rodriguez looked around and noticed the restlessness of the other soldiers. Everyone was focused on the entrance to the tunnel, because that smell was coming from the tunnel. As Rodriguez entered Commander Wilson's tent, he had only one thing on his mind. How many more will we lose? Wilson was studying the map and drawing red shapes over the Cu Chi tunnel. Each point represented a loss. When Rodriguez looked at the map, he was shocked by how many marks there were. There was concern in Rodriguez's voice as he said, "Commander, what do these marks mean? How many soldiers are missing?" Wilson looked at Rodriguez. There were dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. "Rodriguez, every red mark you see here represents one of our soldiers. Patterson and Davis are just the tip of the iceberg." Rodriguez had seen 13 red dots. It took his breath away. That number was too high. 13 soldiers. "Sir, the government reports say only 2 are missing." "Rodriguez, those reports are filled with what Washington wants to hear." Wilson's voice was hopeless. "The truth is, we've lost 13 men in the same tunnel over the last 6 weeks." Wilson continued, Rodriguez, the strangest thing is that we haven't found any of the soldiers' bodies. There was no blood or signs of a struggle. It was as if all the soldiers had vanished into thin air. What about the audio recordings, Commander? Patterson and Davis's last messages? Wilson pulled out a tape recorder and inserted a cassette. Patterson's voice came from the tape. God, what is this? This can't be human. Then Davis's voice was heard. Something is calling me. I have to go. A strange sound that Rodriguez had never heard before was playing. It was a whispering sound with a hypnotic melody. Commander, what is this music? We don't know, Rodriguez. Our experts have analyzed this sound. However, these frequencies are not man-made. Such sounds do not exist in nature. A terrible suspicion formed in Rodriguez's mind. Commander, could these men have disappeared? Wilson looked at Rodriguez sternly. What do you mean? Commander, what I'm trying to say is, either these men left of their own accord or something called them to come here. Wilson remained silent for a long time. Then he pulled a file out of the drawer. Rodriguez, what I'm about to show you is a classified file. You must not tell anyone. Inside the file were photographs of wall drawings and strange symbols extracted from the tunnels. And there was Rodriguez's blood. In the photographs, there were human silhouettes that seemed to be embedded in the wall. Commander, what are these? No one knows, Rodriguez. But after every soldier goes missing, these silhouettes increase. The scariest part is, he pointed to one of the photos. Some of these silhouettes match the bodies of our missing soldiers. Rodriguez was terrified as he examined the photos. One of the silhouettes matched Patterson's height, and another matched Davis's. Commander, what do you think happened to these men? Wilson looked out the window. Rodriguez, I don't know. But tonight, you and your team will enter those tunnels, and no matter the cost, you must find all the answers. Rodriguez's eyes darkened when he heard Wilson's words. His instincts told him this mission was a death sentence. How many of us are going, sir? You're my most experienced men, and 5 of you will go. You, Martinez, Kowalski, Brown, and Jackson. When Rodriguez heard those names, his lips went dry. Because these young men were only 19 or 20 years old, taking them into those tunnels was like sending them to their deaths. Commander, maybe someone more experienced. Wilson's voice was firm. Rodriguez, this is an order. You will depart tomorrow night at 11 p.m. As he stepped out of his tent, that strange smell hit his nose again. This time it was stronger and more alluring. It was as if something was waiting for him. The next night, at 10:45 p.m., 5 soldiers were waiting at the entrance to the tunnel. They all had the same expression on their faces, fear they were trying to hide. Rodriguez looked at his team one last time. Martinez's hands were ice cold. Kowalski kept clearing his throat. Brown and Jackson weren't saying a word. They had all heard the recordings and seen the photos. Martinez said, Sergeant, that smell, it's getting stronger. Rodriguez had also noticed the smell. The strange odor was now so strong that they could almost taste it. Rodriguez said, Listen to me. Tonight, we're only here to scout. No one leaves the group, and the radio connection must never be broken. And most importantly, Rodriguez fell silent, because an unusual sound was coming from the tunnel entrance. At first, they thought it was the sound of the wind. But it wasn't the wind. It sounded very much like a human voice, a muffled sound coming from a distance. Kowalski whispered, "Is that Patterson?" Rodriguez listened intently. The voice really did sound like it was calling a name. Rodriguez. Rodriguez. But the tone of the voice was not Patterson's. It was much deeper and older. Brown's face turned pale. "Sergeant," he said, "it's like someone is calling us." The young soldier's expressions began to change. Like Patterson and Davis in the audio recordings, their eyes were glowing. Rodriguez shouted in a high, sharp voice, "No one move! It's just the wind." The voice was getting closer. Jackson took a step forward. "Sergeant, something is pulling me toward it." "Jackson, get back where you are." Rodriguez grabbed Jackson's arm, but when he touched the soldier's arm, he noticed something terrible. Jackson's skin was ice cold. His pulse was very slow, and his pupils were larger than normal. "Jackson, can you hear me?" Jackson turned his face toward Rodriguez, but he looked very strange. It was as if he didn't recognize Rodriguez. "Sergeant, there are our friends there. They're waiting for us." Rodriguez's blood ran cold. Jackson's voice was starting to harden. He was speaking in the same mesmerized tone as Davis's voice on the recording. "Martinez, Brown, Kowalski, hold Jackson." But it was too late. Jackson broke free from Rodriguez's grip and started running toward the tunnel entrance. Rodriguez shouted, "Jackson, stop!" and ran after him. But Jackson was moving too fast. Jackson stopped at the tunnel entrance and turned around, but that smile sent a chill down Rodriguez's spine, because Jackson's smile was very strange. Jackson said, "Sergeant," but his voice was very different now. "There are beautiful things down there. Come with me and see." And Jackson disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. Rodriguez looked at the team. Martinez, Brown, and Kowalski stared in horror at the direction Jackson had disappeared. Martinez said in a trembling voice, "What happened to Jackson?" His voice sounded so different. Rodriguez knew they couldn't go back, but they couldn't leave Jackson behind either. However, entering that tunnel was akin to suicide. Rodriguez made a decision. "We're going to save Jackson, but no one leaves my side. Keep the radios on at all times. If you sense anything unusual, tell me immediately." Brown asked, "Sergeant, what if we end up like Jackson?" Rodriguez had asked himself that question countless times, but he had no answer. "Then we'll stop each other," he said. Rodriguez now understood. No one who entered that tunnel came out the same person. As he took his first step, he felt that strange smell intensify. But this time, the smell was hypnotizing him. Rodriguez felt his willpower weakening. His steps, beyond his control, were leading him deeper into the tunnel. Martinez's voice, following behind him, was growing fainter. "Sergeant! Sergeant, stop! You're walking too fast!" But stopping was impossible for Rodriguez, because he had become one of the people that voice was calling. In the first section of the tunnel, Rodriguez's consciousness was fading in and out. One moment he was in control. The next, someone else was controlling his body. Martinez kept shouting behind him, "Sergeant! Sergeant, stop! This isn't normal!" Rodriguez could hear Martinez's voice but couldn't respond, because the words coming out of his mouth weren't his own. Rodriguez said, "Come," but his voice had completely changed. "We have to find Jackson. He's down there. It's safe down there." Brown shouted in a timid voice, "Sergeant, your voice has changed. It's just like Jackson's." Rodriguez knew Brown was right. There were two different voices in his head. The other voice was much older, much stronger. The walls felt warm and alive, as if they were breathing. Martinez said, "Look at those lines." Rodriguez saw that the tunnel walls were covered with strange symbols. But these symbols weren't like the ones in Wilson's photos. They were fresh and newly carved. Kowalski said in a trembling voice, "These symbols, they're still alive." Rodriguez examined the symbols closely. He noticed a terrifying detail. The symbols were actually small hand and footprints. Rodriguez whispered, "My God, these are children's footprints." Brown was terrified. "What are children doing here?" he asked. Rodriguez couldn't answer, because the other voice in his head was whispering to him, "Children, so delicious, our favorite." Rodriguez tried to control his thoughts, but the voice grew louder. "Stop! These aren't my thoughts," he shouted. Martinez approached Rodriguez. "Sergeant, who are you talking to?" he asked. "No one." Rodriguez pushed Martinez away. Just everyone shut up." Rodriguez knew he was lying. The voice inside him wouldn't stop, and what it was saying was terrifying him. These soldiers, so young, so fresh. Patterson came like this. Davis too. Jackson too. Rodriguez tried to cover his ears, but the voice was inside his head. There was no escape from this. 200 meters ahead in the tunnel, they found the first clue. Jackson's helmet was lying on the ground, but the bloodstain on the helmet was fresh. Brown shouted, "Jackson, where are you?" The response, coming from the depths of the tunnel, didn't sound like Jackson's voice. It was much deeper and older. "Down here. We're all down here. Come here." Martinez aimed his rifle. "That's not Jackson. Jackson doesn't sound like that." Rodriguez said, No one will answer that voice. That's not Jackson." But Kowalski began to walk forward as if hypnotized. "But Sergeant, he's our friend. We have to help him." "Kowalski, stop!" Rodriguez grabbed Kowalski by the arm, but when he touched the young soldier's arm, he felt the same thing. Ice-cold skin, a slow pulse, dilated pupils. Kowalski was also falling under its influence. Kowalski smiled and said, "Our friends are waiting for us there. It's a beautiful place. There's no need to be afraid." Rodriguez looked into Kowalski's eyes. This wasn't Kowalski anymore. Just like Jackson, something else was controlling Kowalski's body. Rodriguez shouted, "Martinez, Brown, hold Kowalski. He's not Kowalski anymore." But Martinez and Brown were also beginning to change. Both of their faces had the same empty smile. Rodriguez realized the terrifying truth. Everyone in his team was being affected one by one, and it seemed like it was his turn next. The voice in his head grew louder. "There's no need to resist, Rodriguez. You're too tired. Rest here with your friends." Rodriguez resisted with all his strength. "No, I'm Rodriguez. Sergeant Michael Rodriguez." But his voice was growing weaker, because the other voice had almost completely taken control. And at that moment, something emerged from the depths of the tunnel. At first, Rodriguez thought it was human, but as it got closer, he realized it was something much more terrifying. It was human-sized, but very weak, with limbs longer than normal, and its face. Its face resembled a human face, but was much older, much more primitive. The most terrifying part was that the creature's face was constantly changing. One moment it resembled Patterson, the next Davis, then Jackson. The creature said, "Hello, Rodriguez," in Patterson's voice. "We've been waiting for you." Rodriguez froze in place. Rodriguez whispered, "Patterson, is that you?" The creature laughed in a way that sounded like Patterson's laughter, but there was a cold evil in it. "Rodriguez, I am Patterson. I am Davis. I am Jackson. And soon, I will be you." Martinez, Brown, and Kowalski behind Rodriguez silently approached the creature. It was as if someone was controlling them from a distance. Rodriguez shouted, "Guys, stop! He's not our friend." But the three of them seemed not to hear Rodriguez, their eyes fixed on the creature, walking as if hypnotized. The creature approached Rodriguez. "Do you want to know, Rodriguez? Where are your friends?" The creature's voice was now very loud. Patterson, Davis, and Jackson's voices were speaking at the same time. Rodriguez took a step back and leaned his back against the tunnel wall. "They're here, Rodriguez. They're with us. And they're very happy." The creature opened its chest. The sight that met Rodriguez's eyes left him speechless. Inside the creature's chest were the faces of Patterson, Davis, and Jackson. They were breathing as if they were alive, but they were smiling horribly. Patterson spoke from within the creature's chest. "This is wonderful. There's no pain, no fear, only unity." Davis, "Rodriguez, there's no need to resist. We chose this." Finally, Jackson spoke. "Sergeant, we're friends here. We'll be friends forever." Rodriguez stared at the creature in horror. "You? How did you?" "I took them in. I'll take you too, just like I'll take the 3 kids behind you." Rodriguez looked behind him. Martinez, Brown, and Kowalski were now very close, and they had the same look of contentment on their faces. "Sergeant," said Martinez, but his voice had completely changed. "Come with us. It's beautiful here." Brown reached out to touch the creature. "Yes, Sergeant. There's no more war or fear." Kowalski smiled. "We're all family now." Rodriguez was losing the battle in his mind. The other voice had almost completely taken control. "Yes," he began to think. "Why am I resisting? My friends are happy. I could be happy too." The creature seemed to read Rodriguez's thoughts. "There you go, Rodriguez. You understand us now, and resisting will only bring you pain." "Yes, Rodriguez. Come with us, and we'll be together forever." Rodriguez suddenly remembered the photos Wilson had shown him. He remembered the silhouettes on the walls and how many people this creature had taken. Rodriguez shouted at the voice in his head, "I'm Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, and I'm gonna save these men!" Rodriguez turned his rifle toward the creature and fired. The bullets lodged in the creature's body, but the creature only laughed. The bullets pierced its body and then closed up immediately. The creature smiled and said, "Bullets can't hurt us. We are much older and stronger." Rodriguez looked at the creature in despair. If the bullets weren't working, what could he do? And at that moment, Martinez touched the creature. As Martinez's hand touched the creature's skin, it began to disappear into its body. Rodriguez shouted, "Martinez, no!" Martinez looked as if he were experiencing the most beautiful thing in his life. As his body slowly disappeared into the creature, he said, "Don't be afraid. This is a wonderful feeling." Martinez was now inside the creature's chest. There were now 4 of them: Patterson, Davis, Jackson, and Martinez. The creature said, "One left, Rodriguez," and reached toward Brown, adding, "Then it's your turn." Rodriguez lunged toward the creature to save Brown, but it was too late. Brown had also touched the creature and was being sucked in. Rodriguez shouted, "Kowalski, run!" Kowalski wasn't running. On the contrary, he was walking toward the creature. Smiling, he said, "Why should I run? My friends are here." Now Kowalski had also touched the creature. Rodriguez was alone. There were now 600 of them on the creature's chest. All of them were looking at him. All of them were smiling. As the creature walked toward him, it said, "It's your turn. There's no need to resist. Your friends are waiting for you here." Rodriguez began to run toward the exit of the tunnel as a last resort, but the creature was much faster. When Rodriguez heard the sound coming from behind him, he felt his heart stop. "Run, Rodriguez, run, because this is only the beginning. There are hundreds like us here, starving." As Rodriguez ran through the darkness of the tunnel, he noticed that the number of voices behind him was increasing. "Rodriguez! Come back, Rodriguez! Your friends are here. Why are you running, Rodriguez?" The voices were coming from his teammates: Patterson, Davis, Jackson, Martinez, Brown, Kowalski. But there were also voices he didn't recognize. 13 missing soldiers. All of them were calling him back. Rodriguez turned his flashlight behind him as he ran. The sight he saw made him question his sanity. The walls of the tunnel were moving. Hands were emerging from the walls. Feet were swaying. Faces were appearing. And these bodies seemed alive. As Rodriguez continued running, he whispered, "God, this tunnel is made of them." The hands emerging from the walls were trying to grab Rodriguez. Patterson's hand, Davis's hand, the hands of soldiers he didn't recognize. All of them were trying to pull him into the depths of the tunnel. Rodriguez narrowly escaped being grabbed by a hand, but the hand left an odd sensation on his skin. It felt like an electric shock, and it began to spread throughout his body. "Rodriguez, this is a trap. They're trying to hypnotize me." Rodriguez's thoughts began to grow fuzzy. His running speed slowed. Patterson's voice whispered in his head, "You're ours now. Don't resist." Rodriguez gathered his last strength. "I'm Rodriguez," he shouted. "Sergeant Michael Rodriguez. I'm getting out of here." He could see the tunnel exit now. Far away, very far away, a small point of light. But the creatures were approaching. Rodriguez ran without looking back. The exit was getting closer, closer. Just as he was about to reach the exit, something caught his foot. He fell to the ground and was overcome with terror. The thing holding his foot was a human hand that had emerged from the ground, but it was much larger and stronger. It seemed as though the hand was speaking. "Don't go, Rodriguez. Stay here with us." Rodriguez tried to free his hand, and more hands began to emerge from the ground. "No! Let me go!" Rodriguez managed to pull his hand free with his last ounce of strength. When he reached the tunnel exit, he looked back one last time. The creatures were standing right behind the exit, but they weren't coming out. Patterson's voice echoed, "Rodriguez, this is only the beginning. We'll be waiting for you here, and you will come back." Rodriguez had managed to get out. He breathed in the night air. He was free. As Rodriguez ran toward the campsite, he looked back. The tunnel entrance looked normal. as if nothing had ever happened. When he reached the camp, he found Commander Wilson. "Commander! Commander! Terrible things have happened!" Wilson was shocked to see Rodriguez's condition. "Rodriguez, what happened? Where is your team?" "Commander, they're there, in the tunnel, but they're not the same anymore." Wilson looked at him suspiciously. "What do you mean, Rodriguez?" Rodriguez tried to explain what had happened. The creatures, the people who had gone inside, the hands coming out of the walls. He couldn't find the words to describe what he had experienced, because what had happened made no sense. "Commander, you have to believe me. There are terrible things in that tunnel. No more soldiers should go there." Wilson studied Rodriguez for a long time. "Rodriguez, you may have suffered trauma. Maybe." "No, Commander. This isn't trauma. This is real." But the expression on Wilson's face showed he didn't believe him. "Rodriguez, the doctor will examine you tomorrow, and you won't tell anyone about what we talked about." Rodriguez realized Wilson didn't believe him. "Sir, please seal off that tunnel. Don't send anyone else there." "Rodriguez, go rest. You'll think more clearly tomorrow." Rodriguez saw a familiar glint in Wilson's eyes, and it felt like cold water had been poured over him. Before descending into the tunnel, the same glint was in Jackson's eyes as well. As Rodriguez returned to his own tent, he realized a terrifying truth. The creatures weren't just in the tunnel anymore. They were in the camp as well, and no one was safe. That night, Rodriguez couldn't sleep, because from outside his tent, he heard familiar voices. "Rodriguez. Come, Rodriguez. Your friends are waiting for you." The most frightening part was that the voice was coming from Wilson's tent. When morning came, Rodriguez noticed a strange silence in the camp. Under normal circumstances, there would be the sounds of soldiers talking, preparing breakfast, changing guard. But this morning was different. When Rodriguez stepped out of his tent, the first thing he noticed was Wilson's tent. The door was open, but there was no sound coming from inside. Rodriguez called out, "Commander!" As he approached the tent, Rodriguez's blood ran cold. When he entered Wilson's tent, there was no one inside, and there were fresh bloodstains on the ground. Rodriguez shouted, "Wilson! Where are you, Wilson?" He looked at the other tents in the camp. He checked each one individually. They were all empty, with bloodstains and that strange smell. When Rodriguez stepped outside, he realized the horrific truth. No one was left. The 50-man unit had vanished overnight. Only Rodriguez remained. Rodriguez whispered, "This isn't possible. 50 people. How?" And then he heard a voice behind him. "Hello, Rodriguez." He turned around. Wilson was there, but his eyes were pitch black and he was smiling. "Commander, you... how?" Wilson said, "I'm not Wilson, Rodriguez." His voice was very different from the others. "I belong to all the soldiers. Soon you will too." Rodriguez took a step back. "You? How did you get out of here? You couldn't get out of the tunnel." Wilson laughed. "We can't get out, Rodriguez, but we can get out when we're invited." Rodriguez tried to understand. "Invitations? From whom?" "From your friends, Rodriguez. What you said was very impressive, and the other soldiers were curious. They went to look at the tunnel last night." Rodriguez felt sick. "No, they went of their own free will." "Of course, Rodriguez. After hearing your stories, they were very curious, and we welcomed them very warmly." Rodriguez looked behind Wilson. The other soldiers in the camp were coming out of their tents, but they were all staring blankly and smiling. Wilson said, 50 people, Rodriguez. They're all with us. They're all happy. And now, it's your turn. Rodriguez started running. But where could he escape? The forest was filled with creatures. There was no safe place. Wilson shouted after him, Rodriguez, you can't escape. This land is ours. Vietnam is ours. Every tunnel, every cave, every inch of soil belongs to us. As he ran, Rodriguez began to understand the truth about Vietnam. This war wasn't just between Americans and the Viet Cong. It was an older war, and people were being lost. Rodriguez thought, that's why we'll never win. Because the enemy isn't human. As he ran deeper into the jungle, an idea came to Rodriguez. If he could reach the US via the radio at the camp and report the situation. But when he returned to the camp, he saw Wilson at the radio station. Need the radio, Rodriguez? He said. Don't tell anyone, because who would believe you? Rodriguez looked at Wilson in despair. What? What do you want? We just want unity, Rodriguez. Unity with all humans, and you are the last piece of that unity. Wilson approached Rodriguez. Look, Rodriguez. See how happy your friends are. Rodriguez looked around the camp. 50 soldiers, all with the same expression, the same cold smile, were looking at him and smiling. Rodriguez, they're not suffering anymore. There's no fear, only unity. Rodriguez turned his rifle toward Wilson. Stay away from me. Wilson approached without paying attention to the rifle. You know the bullets won't work. And besides, these are your friends' bodies. Do you want to shoot them? Wilson reached out toward the rifle. You understand now. There's no point in resisting. Rodriguez looked at Wilson's hand, considering his last option. If the creatures had destroyed the radio, if he couldn't alert anyone, at least he had to trap them here. Rodriguez grabbed Wilson's hand and pulled out the grenade from his waist. Rodriguez, what are you doing? Wilson shouted. I'm trying to stop you. Rodriguez pulled the pin on the grenade. I'll destroy this camp, this tunnel, all of you. Wilson started laughing. Rodriguez, we won't die. We're too old. Grenades can't stop us. Rodriguez held the grenade tightly and said, Maybe I can't kill you, but at least I'll stop others from coming. And Rodriguez ran toward the tunnel entrance with the grenade. Rodriguez, stop! Wilson shouted. Come with us. Why are you choosing death? Rodriguez stopped at the tunnel entrance. He looked back at the camp one last time. 50 friends were watching him and smiling. Rodriguez said, Some things are worse than death. And he threw the bomb into the tunnel entrance. The explosion shook the entire forest. The tunnel entrance collapsed. Half of the camp was destroyed. Rodriguez was thrown by the force of the explosion. The last thing he saw was Wilson's screaming face, and then darkness. But the story didn't end there because Rodriguez and the creatures weren't dead yet. Rodriguez remembered the last moment before losing consciousness. Wilson's scream and the sound of the explosion. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a completely different place. He was lying in a hospital room. But this wasn't Vietnam. It was America. The woman sitting in the chair next to him said, You're finally awake. You've been in a coma for 2 weeks. Rodriguez looked at the woman. She was wearing a nurse's uniform. Rodriguez asked, Who am I? Where am I? You're at the San Francisco Military Hospital. You're Sergeant Michael Rodriguez. You were in an explosion in Vietnam. That's why you may have lost your memory. Rodriguez looked around in confusion. The events in Vietnam seemed like a distant dream. My friends. Where are my friends? The nurse shook her head sadly. Rodriguez, I'm sorry. You're the only one who survived. Your team. The explosion was very powerful. Rodriguez tried to understand what the nurse was saying, but there were strange noises in his head. Patterson. Martinez. Are they all dead? Yes, Rodriguez. They're all dead. You're the only one who survived. As the nurse spoke, there was an odd gleam in her eyes. Rodriguez had seen that gleam before. Rodriguez asked suspiciously, "Who are you?" "I'm Nurse Sarah Williams. I'm in charge of your treatment." Rodriguez looked at Sarah more closely. There was something familiar about her face. Rodriguez asked, "Did the explosion in Vietnam really happen?" Sarah smiled. It was the same cold smile. Rodriguez's hair stood on end. "Of course it did, Rodriguez. And you showed great bravery. You stopped the creatures." Rodriguez flinched at the word creatures. How do you know about the creatures?" "Because, Rodriguez, we never died." Rodriguez tried to get out of bed, but his body wouldn't move. His hands, his feet. He couldn't control any of them. What did you do to me?" "Just sedatives, Rodriguez. You've been through a lot. You need to rest." Sarah approached Rodriguez, and Rodriguez saw the horrific truth. Sarah's face was constantly changing. The faces of all his friends he knew appeared and disappeared on Sarah's face. Sarah said in Wilson's voice, "The bomb couldn't kill us, Rodriguez. It only caused temporary discomfort." Rodriguez looked at Sarah in horror. But this is America. You stayed in Vietnam." "Sarah. Rodriguez, you never returned to America. You're still in Vietnam. This hospital, it's all a figment of your imagination." Rodriguez looked around. The room seemed real. The sounds, the smells, the touch. Everything was real. Rodriguez said, "No, this is real. I'm here. I survived." Sarah sat down next to him and said, "You died in that explosion, but we brought you back because we have special plans for you." Rodriguez tried to make sense of Sarah's words. "Plans? What plans?" "Rodriguez, you will be our representative in America. When you return, you will tell everyone what you saw in Vietnam, and more soldiers will come here." Rodriguez understood the horrific plan. You're going to use me as bait." "Exactly, Rodriguez. When you return, you'll tell your friends about the tunnels in Vietnam. They'll be curious and come here." Sarah, "And now, Rodriguez, it's time for you to return to the real world." The room began to disappear before Rodriguez's eyes. The walls were melting. The ceiling was disappearing. Rodriguez found himself back in the tunnel. His friends were there. They were all looking at him and smiling. Patterson said, "Welcome back to the real world." Rodriguez realized the horrific truth. He had never escaped. The hospital, America, everything was a figment of his imagination. He was still in the creature's hands, and the real plan was just beginning. Rodriguez realized a terrifying truth. His body no longer belonged to him. He didn't want to, but his hands were moving. It was as if he was trapped inside his own body, and someone was watching him from the outside. Watching Rodriguez's movements, Patterson said, "Perfect. We have complete control." Rodriguez was shocked when he heard his own voice. "Yes, it feels very perfect." But he wasn't the one saying those words. "Rodriguez," said Wilson, "we will now explain your mission. You will return to America, but not as the real Rodriguez." Two different consciousnesses were battling inside Rodriguez's mind. The creature's consciousness was strong, but Rodriguez's true consciousness was still resisting. Rodriguez thought, "No, I won't let this happen." "Now listen to the plan," said Martinez's voice, but it wasn't Martinez anymore. Davis stepped forward. "When you return to America, you will be told that you suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. It's normal. No one will suspect you." Rodriguez tried to understand the plan, but at the same time, he was trying to regain his own consciousness. Wilson said, "But the most important thing is that when you talk to your family and friends, you'll tell them about the tunnels in Vietnam." Jackson laughed. "But of course, you won't tell the truth. You'll tell stories that will arouse curiosity. Hidden treasures, secret tunnels, undiscovered places." A terrifying truth dawned on Rodriguez. "They're going to use me. They're going to use me as bait." Patterson replied as if reading his mind, "Exactly, Rodriguez. When you return, your curious friends, the adventurers, the history buffs, will come to Vietnam. They'll search for those tunnels." And in that moment, Rodriguez realized it wasn't just Vietnam. You're not just in Vietnam," he thought. Wilson smiled. "You're very smart. We're not just in Vietnam. We're in every battlefield, every old cave, every abandoned tunnel." Martinez continued, "We're in Cambodia, Laos, and Korea. We've been in Europe since World War II." Rodriguez's blood ran cold. How many?" Davis said. "Thousands, Rodriguez. Tens of thousands. In every war there are fallen soldiers, and they're all with us." Patterson approached. "Rodriguez, we are not yet in America. Your mission is to be our first representative in America." Rodriguez resisted with his last ounce of strength. "No, I won't allow it. You can't go back to America." But his body began to laugh against his will. "Of course we'll go back, Rodriguez. Thanks to you." Wilson approached Rodriguez. "Rodriguez, we'll show you one last thing to make you understand how important your mission is." Rodriguez found himself in a massive cave. The sight before him made him think he was losing his mind. Thousands of soldiers, all of them staring at him with the same blank expression, the same cold smile. Wilson said, "Every lost soldier since World War II is here. German soldiers, Japanese soldiers, American soldiers, Russian soldiers. They no longer have nationalities. They all belong to us." Patterson said, "And now, Rodriguez, you will transport this army to America." Rodriguez resisted one last time. "Never. I will never allow this." Wilson laughed. "Rodriguez, you're already one of us. There's nothing left to resist." Rodriguez saw his own hands giving the creature's salute. He heard his own voice say, "Yes, Commander, I will carry out my mission." Wilson said, "Perfect. Now, it's time to return to America." The cave transformed back into a tunnel, and Rodriguez found himself at the tunnel's exit. But he was now Creature Rodriguez. He was ready to return to America. 6 months later, Creature Rodriguez stepped off the plane. His appearance was completely normal. The memories, behaviors, and voice of the old Rodriguez were all replicas. However, the real Rodriguez was still trapped deep within his body. "Rodriguez, Rodriguez, you're here." Rodriguez's mother embraced her son, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God you're safe and sound." Creature Rodriguez hugged his mother. "I missed you so much." The real Rodriguez, unable to touch or speak to his mother, screamed inwardly. Creature Rodriguez began to carry out his plan. The Creature Rodriguez said to his brother David, "I saw some really interesting things in Vietnam. Old French tunnels, unexplored caves. There's incredible history there." David listened curiously. "Really? What kind of places?" "There are still treasures there. Old maps, hidden rooms. But it's very dangerous, so no one goes in." The real Rodriguez saw that his brother had fallen into the Creature's trap. "David, no, don't believe him." But David could only hear Creature Rodriguez. He told this story to the other veterans in the hospital and to his friends. His friend Tony said, "You must have seen some really secret things in Vietnam. I'm curious now." "Tony, there are incredible places," said Creature Rodriguez. "But they're very dangerous. You can't go alone." Tony started laughing. "Maybe we'll go with a few friends. What do you say? Will you be our guide?" A sinister gleam appeared in Creature Rodriguez's eyes. "Of course, Tony. I'll take you to the most interesting places." The real Rodriguez tried to warn Tony. "Tony, run! That's not me!" But Tony couldn't hear anything. 3 months later, Tony and 5 friends went to Vietnam. Creature Rodriguez acted as their guide. None of them returned. Tony's family reported him missing to the police, but Creature Rodriguez had a perfect explanation. They went out on their own. I showed them safe places, but they wanted more. The police believed Creature Rodriguez because he was a perfect witness, and so the first 6 people fell into the Creature's hands. The following year, Monster Rodriguez's stories spread even further. Documentary filmmakers came. Historians came. Adventurers came. Documentary director Angelia asked, "Who are you?" "I'm a Vietnam veteran. I want to share the hidden history there with the world," said Monster Rodriguez. Angelia listened, spellbound. When the documentary aired, hundreds of thousands watched, and hundreds decided to go to Vietnam. Creature Rodriguez offered to guide them all. Within 3 years, thousands of Americans went to Vietnam, and none returned. But the most terrifying part was, Creature Rodriguez wasn't just talking about Vietnam. "There are interesting places in Cambodia too," he told his friends. "In Laos too. In Korea too. There are millions of people in America, Rodriguez. We'll bring them all here, one by one." It wasn't just his friends anymore. The entire country was in danger. No one knew the truth. Creature Rodriguez continued living in America, wearing his perfect mask. And every day, he handed over more people to the creatures. Rodriguez's last hopes were beginning to fade, because he had finally understood that the creatures were winning, and no one could stop them. Creature Rodriguez whispered, "But this story isn't over yet." Because the creature's true plan was much bigger. Rodriguez was just the first piece. Today, in 2025, the former Vietnam veteran Rodriguez is still alive and 76 years old, living in San Francisco. Last month, his granddaughter Melly heard this story from Rodriguez. Melly asked her grandfather, "Can I put this story on YouTube? It's so inspiring." Rodriguez, now known as Creature Rodriguez, smiled. "Of course, Melly. People need to learn from history." Sarah uploaded the video that night with the title, "Paranormal Events During the Vietnam War, a Veteran's Account." The video received 5 million views within 3 days. "Wow, that's really an amazing story. I want to go to Vietnam too." "Is anyone going to see those tunnels?" But what Melly didn't notice was that some of the people watching the video were starting to change. Jennifer began researching Vietnam constantly after watching the video. Eventually, she started getting up in the middle of the night and searching for Vietnam flight tickets without even realizing it. Marcus felt an odd pull when he heard Rodriguez's voice in the video. It was as if the voice was directly entering his mind. Melly didn't notice these changes. The police came to their house. "Mrs. Rodriguez," said the detective, "we can't find your granddaughter, Melly Rodriguez. She's been missing for 3 days." Creature Rodriguez: "What happened to Melly? She was just researching Vietnam." Commissioner: "Did she go to Vietnam?" "I don't know. She's been very curious about it lately because of that video." Indeed, Melly had gone to the airport and bought a ticket to Vietnam. It was as if she were being remotely controlled. Thanks to the video, the creatures could now use the internet. Creature Rodriguez looked in the mirror and smiled, because it wasn't just Melly. Hundreds of people watching the video were experiencing the same thing. They were going to airports and flying to Vietnam. None of them were coming back. We can reach millions of people at the same time. The internet is a perfect tool, thought Rodriguez. The real Rodriguez was still screaming, "Melly, let my granddaughter go. She's just a child." Melly was now the new representative of the creatures. She was young, modern, and skilled at social media. In the tunnels of Vietnam, Melly was learning her new job. She would shoot TikTok videos, share them on Instagram, and tell stories on Snapchat. A week later, Melly's first TikTok video was released. A real paranormal experience in Vietnam. #horror, #paranormal, #Vietnam. The video received 75 million views in 24 hours. Thousands of young people began planning trips to Vietnam after watching the video. "I want to go see those tunnels too." "Anyone going to Vietnam? Let's form a group." It wasn't just retired veterans anymore. Everyone connected to the internet around the world was now a target for the creatures. Creature Rodriguez began giving interviews on news channels. "My granddaughter Melly is making very important historical discoveries in Vietnam. The places there are extremely dangerous." These interviews sparked even more interest. CNN, BBC, Fox News. Everyone was curious about Melly's story, and every news report led more people to want to go to Vietnam. Last month, the Vietnamese tourism ministry made a surprising announcement. The number of tourists visiting our country this year has increased by 3,000%. Especially young Americans want to see the historical tunnels. The ministry didn't add anything else. 90% of these tourists weren't coming back. Rodriguez watched the news on TV, and the real Rodriguez resisted one last time. "Stop! Enough is enough. How many more will die?" The creature Rodriguez laughed. "They're not dying, they're joining us." Rodriguez looked out the window at the city of San Francisco. "Soon, no one will need to go to Vietnam, because we're coming here." That night, strange sounds began to be heard in the old subway tunnels beneath San Francisco. The last video Melly filmed was of the tunnels beneath San Francisco. The video description read, "My friends from Vietnam have arrived in America. Those who want to meet them should come to the coordinates below. San Francisco, secret tunnel discovery." The video was set to be released tomorrow. Rodriguez knew that once the video was released, there would be no escape, because the creatures would enter their final phase, the invasion of America. Does the story end here? No, because you heard this story, and now you might be wondering, are these tunnels real? Are there really such places in Vietnam? Where are Melly's videos? If these questions are on your mind, be careful, because curiosity is the creature's most powerful weapon, and they are feeding on your curiosity right now. That's why don't forget to subscribe. If you want more videos about real stories like this, hit the like button and let us know in the comments. In the next video, we'll analyze Melly's latest TikTok videos, if we can find them. If you're wondering, is Rodriguez's story true? No one knows. But if you wake up tomorrow morning and dream about Vietnam, then know this: it's too late, because they found you too.